Martin, what was your motivation for writing this book, and who do you think and hope will read the book?
I hadn't expected to write another book, but suddenly in the second week in May, all these amazing revelations came out about the MP's expenses, and I'd been an MP for 4 years. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I then went off to Somalia for a week for UNICEF. I'm one of their ambassadors, and I thought when I came back, well, I'd put it in perspective. When I came back, it got even worse. These great scandals cascading all over the papers, about half the MPs doing things they shouldn't have done. And then I realised, I've been in Puntland, where the pirates are. We have homegrown pirates, and their pirate ship is the Palace of Westminster. So I decided to write a book about it, and the book just about wrote itself. It just sort of fell off the page, day after day, as more of these revelations occurred, so I'm pleased I did it.
What impact do you think this book will have on British politics?
I hope that I can, through this book, make more impact on politics than if I were an independent backbencher. The people I'm trying to reach are, first of all, the British people, who are highly incensed about this, but then the politicians themselves, that they can't go on as they have been, and I think they understand that. But if it's all set down in sort of 60,000 words, they can see very clearly where they've got it wrong and how they have to do things differently.
Now, in your own experience as a politician, in what ways was it particularly evident that expenses were being exploited by MPs?
I spent 4 years in the House of Commons from 1997 to 2001. I realised there were some odd things going on, but I had no idea of the scale of it. And I think it accelerated during the years after 2001 when I was out. I think when the House of Commons constructively dismissed its parliamentary commissioner, Elizabeth Filkin, for inquiring too thoroughly into the MP's affairs, that then sent a message to all MPs that, oh, come on, it's all right, you can get away with whatever you want. And so they did, with results that we see today.
And are there any particular experiences from your time on the Standards and Privileges Committee that best exemplify the excesses in the expenses scandal, and how has that insider's experience helped you understand what are the problems with British politics?
I wouldn't have written this book if I hadn't been not just an MP, but served for 3.5 years on the Standards and Privileges Committee. You see, I was part of the regulatory machinery, and I saw what worked and what didn't, especially in this case what didn't. And when a senior politician came before the committee accused of breaking the rules, it was quite obvious that some of the younger and more junior MPs were unwilling to challenge him. With one exception, it was always a him. And there were 2 or 3 of us who stood up for what we thought was right. We were always overruled because the committee operated by consensus. And if I have a regret now, it is that I should have resigned way back in 2000, and I didn't.
Now, you also mention in the book A Very British Revolution that the dismissal of Elizabeth Filkin was a great injustice, and that not resigning from the Standards and Privileges Committee at that time was probably your greatest mistake as an MP. Why was her dismissal such an outrage to you?
Elizabeth Filkin came from the Inland Revenue. She knew how to do difficult jobs in public service. And she just did this like any other, but she had no idea of the opposition that she would encounter from MPs who were set in their ways and determined to go on doing what all they already had doing. It was a club. They didn't want to be challenged by an outsider. And of course, in the end, she was employed by the House of Commons Commission, which could get rid of her. Looking back now, the last 10 years, I think there have been 2 episodes which were an utter disgrace in public life. One was the dismissal of Elizabeth Filkin, and the other was the hounding to death of Dr. David Kelly. Now, it's too late for restitution to Dr. Kelly. But I think in the case of Elizabeth Filkin, the House of Commons Commission should now offer her an unreserved apology for the unworthy way in which she was treated.
Now, you also devote a chapter in the book to former Speaker Michael Martin. How do you perceive that he contributed to the expenses scandal? Was he part of a political status quo that attempted to prevent the expenses scandal from appearing in the public domain?
I think in the end he wasn't up to it. Sooner or later, the Freedom of Information requests under the new law this was going to come into the open. And the House of Commons Commission, under Speaker Martin's leadership, fought it every inch of the way, trying to get MPs exempted. And honestly, if it hadn't been for some mole within the Fees Office, getting hold of these CDs, these discs, it would have been covered up because they redacted it. The great black squares over the pages of expenses. We would never have known about the mole traps, about the Duck Island, and more seriously about the phantom mortgages. In fact, the MPs would have got away with it. So this was a very close-run thing.
Now, you do suggest also, well, in fact, you devote a chapter of the book to Ian Gibson, who was, in your opinion, an unfortunate casualty of the expenses crisis. Do you think that good, honest politicians have fallen foul of the expenses scandal?
I think a lot of creepy politicians have fallen foul of it. I think Ian Gibson was an honest man. He made no personal profit whatever. In fact, he lost money by resigning. All these other people are hanging on until the last days of the Parliament so they can collect £31,000 in resettlement allowances. Not Ian. I call him an honourable scapegoat. And I look at the MPs who've been got rid of. Some had to be. But on the Tory side, they're mostly the backwoodsmen who do not fit into David Cameron's idea of the new Conservative Party. And the Labour Party got rid of Ian. Well, he was awkward squad. He was serious awkward squad, and they didn't like him. So I don't think the parties have played this well either.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that Nick Clegg encouraged you to run for the empty seat in Norwich in conjunction with the Liberal Democrats. Were you tempted then, or at any other time, since the expenses crisis, to return back to politics?
I've thought about it. I'm still thinking about it. I'm 71, which is quite a big age to be one of the piston rods of revolution. I think I can be more influential outside the House of Commons than in it. But I haven't said absolutely no and under no circumstances. But I'm encouraging independents from Salford to all over the country to have a go, and I think I can be more effective like that.
But how do you feel that the party leaders dealt with the crisis personally? Do you feel that the correct responses have been made?
I think the parties have been very different. I think Nick Clegg, his party's not as damaged as the others, though they've got their problems. I think David Cameron has been extremely agile in demanding that his MPs repay the money, but notice that he hasn't actually dismissed a single front bencher. Even Alan Duncan, whose expenses are questionable, has been demoted, but he's still on the front bench, if not the shadow cabinet. I think the governing party, the Labour Party, has been incredibly leaden-footed. They didn't really understand it. Their Star Chamber, which got rid of Ian Gibson, he was their first casualty, was probably unjust. There was no appeal procedure. And I think they've been more damaged than any other party, and in a sense they should have been, because this happened on their watch. It didn't have to happen. We've seen this coming at us since at least 2002.
Yeah. Now, what's your opinion on Hazel Blear's involvement in the scandal, and what is your opinion on her particular claims and her subsequent resignation from the cabinet?
Well, as we speak, I'm about to go and address a Hazel Must Go rally in Salford. If you're handing back £13,000, then I think you have to explain why. And I think you should. I think if she'd come clean and said, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that, I think people understand remorse and contrition.
Yeah.
There's been a remarkable lack of remorse and contrition. But it's for the people of Salford to decide. She's sitting on a majority of, 9,000? I don't think that's safe anymore. And what the people of Salford have to decide is whether they want, first of all, whether they want her to continue as an MP, and if they don't, whether they challenge her with a candidate from one of the existing parties, or whether they run an independent against her. It'll be tough, but I think it's doable.
What's your thoughts about the Daily Telegraph's involvement in the scandal, and was it wholly for the public good, or must we be wary sort of the power of checkbook journalism?
I think the Telegraph has behaved admirably. It's a kind of once-in-a-lifetime chance for an editor. There's a very strong public defence of the checkbook journalism in this case. If it was only £75,000, everything has been exposed.